Welcome back, everyone, to our modding discussion of Motorsport Manager. Now, in previous videos, we have discussed the various HQ buildings. We've discussed things in the single-seater design data file, such as length of races and tires. In our most recent video, we talked about the stat progression for mechanics, engineers, and drivers. So in this particular video, we're going to take a look at the championships themselves. So we'll go ahead and start off by opening the championships file. And as usual, as we've seen previously, you've got your headings across the top and then your three championships. But because there is a lot going on here, and you can see there is a lot of numbers and a lot of information, and it just keeps scrolling across. So there's a lot to see here. So rather than spending the entire video looking at this file, what I'm actually going to do is bring up the spreadsheet version of this, so it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye, and we can discuss it a little bit easier. Okay, we start off by noticing that we have our three tiers, and each of them have an ID. 0 is the ID for tier 1, 1 is the ID for tier 2, and then finally 2 is the ID for tier 3. Okay, and you can see here, this is the order in which they are in the game. You've got information regarding the logo that they use. This is interesting because it's choosable, meaning that you could actually force somebody to start off with tier 3 and give them no option to start off in tier 2 or tier 1. So interesting, something to keep in mind. And then let's take a look at, you see various other things. Now, the interesting things to note are locations. You see all of these numbers, okay? And all of them in this section have semicolons. That's because these are all the tracks and layouts that are used in this particular tier. So you could change this to be any track and any layout that you want. So let's take a look real quickly at what these mean. So you got 28, 40, 2, 11, and so on. Well, for that, we would need to normally take a look at the locations file, but let's go ahead and do that in spreadsheet format. Now, I didn't clean this one up quite as much because we don't need to look at it all that much, but here's what you need to know. All right, circuit 0 is Ardennes, and it only has one layout. Beijing, however, is circuit ID 1, and that is for the A layout. Beijing for track layout B is circuit ID 2, and then so on. Beijing circuit ID 3 is layout C, and so on as you go down. And all the tracks are listed in here. So all the numbers you see listed correspond to the circuit ID column listed here. So that's what all of these numbers mean. So if any changes you want to make are simply a matter of going to your locations file and seeing which numbers and IDs match up with the track and the layout that you want. Now, the rules, you can see a whole bunch of rules here for the thing. That is what you see whenever you look at the rules for the different tiers. The screen pops up that tells you how long the practice session is and whether or not there's qualifying and fuel and so on. That's what all of these represent. You can see 3, 6, 9, 15, 18, and so on. And again, you can change these to whatever you like, and they correspond to the rules, which corresponds to the rule changes file, which we're seeing in spreadsheet form here. The first 3 rules relate to the length of practice: short, medium, and long. But you might be thinking, wait a minute, it says short, medium, and long practice sessions, but how do I know how long a short practice session is? How do I know how long a medium practice session is? Well, that's contained in simulation settings. Short practice session, 12 minutes long. Medium practice, 15. Long is 20, and then so on with qualifying. And you notice that the race doesn't have a duration. That's because we take care of that in a different file. Now, it does have a length in what I believe this is in minutes, but I'm not sure how that's used or if it's used within the game. But we've looked at in the past in that single-seater design data file, we've looked at how you can make changes to the length of the race. So now we have the ability to change the length of all the practice sessions, the qualifying sessions, and the race. So we can make adjustments to all of those, and then they correspond into this file. Okay, so we can set the length of the practice session here, but let's take a look at how that actually lines up. So we come back to our championship file, and we get through. Here are all of our locations. There's all of our locations. Then we get into 3 is our first rule for the Tier 1, the World Championship. So we got 3, and let's see what that corresponds to here. 3 corresponds to the practice length of long practice sessions. And again, if you're watching the introductory videos, that's what I have it set to by default in the game. So that's what the ID 3 responds to, long practice sessions. Then we get into the length of qualifying, if there's going to be qualifying. That's a different rule. Then we get into which length of race are we going to use. And then we get into, again, we're talking about rule changes. So this is where you get into the politics of everything. If you want to change a particular track and layout to a new layout, keep the same track, new layout, there you go. There's the political vote that pops up. If you want to swap out an old track for a new track, there it is, and so forth. So this gets into the politics of adding or removing a track or simply swapping one out. Then you get into the pit stops. Okay, here's your pit lane speed limits. How fast do you want the pit lane speed limit to be? 50, 70, so on. The crews. Do you want 4-man crews? Do you want unlimited crews? Here's your prize money. How do you want the merit payments to be spread out? Do you want them to be equal regardless of finishing position from the team, or extremely high? So you can see all of the various things. Here's where you can have double points in the final event, which I'm not a big fan of. I've actually lost a championship like that one time at the final event. Then you get your extra bonuses for fastest lap. Do you want it on or off? Then your bonus points for being on the pole, on or off. And then the type of tire you want. Do you want the slick tires? Do you want the groove tires? And so on. Compound choices. Do you have free choice, or are they pre-distributed? Do you want 2 dry weather compounds or 3? And then so on. You can see all of these things are available. Then you get safety car. Okay, you got 2 options here. Do you want virtual safety car only, or do you want the real safety car only? Okay, then you get into the refueling. What are the limits on the fuel tank? Is it 40? Is it 80? Or is there no refueling whatsoever as you get down into there? Driver aids, are they on or off? And then you get into your spec parts. Do you want to be able to work on the engines, or do you want them to be spec parts? Okay, spec gearboxes, or can they be developed? And that's the same thing for all of the different parts. And then finally, you get down to your grid order. How is the starting order of the race determined? Is it determined by qualifying? Is it random, or is it reverse? So you've got a lot of different options to go through in here. And essentially, you just come into your text file and you make these changes, semicolon in between all, because we are still in the rules section, and commas delineate new sections. So all of these, looking for the comma, making sure not to go past it. There we go. So all of these are the rules employed by the Tier 1 teams. And then you go the same thing with Tier 2 and Tier 3, all of your locations, and then all of your rules. Okay, so let's come back to our championship. Okay, so once we're in here, then you say, okay, what else do we have? Okay, I'm not exactly sure what these two mean. I believe it's corresponding to the actual location that is the first race of the year, and then the location that is the last race of the year. But what I mean by I'm not sure what it means is, if that's not it, how does it determine the order other than that? In other words, if you're starting the year at location 11, then why isn't 11 simply the first on the list? and you just go in order. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on and how these columns are used. Then you get into the teams, okay? And the teams operate the very same way. You see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Now, within the teams area, if we find them, then you'll notice here they are. Okay, in each team, you notice that we have an ID associated with them. Okay, so here's team number 1, number 2, and so on, all the way down to, you can see where I've changed the name of ZRT to actually be Knee Pit Gaming. And then you can see which team we are as well. Okay, so that's what these correspond to. So you can actually swap out teams there. I don't believe it's quite that simple, because I believe there's some other files you need to change in order to make that happen. But here's one of the places where you can determine which teams are in which series. Okay, and then moving over a little bit farther, this is your prize fund. This is how much money is distributed amongst the teams at the end of the year. And we've already seen, as part of our rule changes, that we can decide if that's going to be equally distributed amongst all the teams, or if it's going to be distributed in some way or in shape and form based on your finishing position in the championship. You've got also TV audience. I believe that is supposed to affect the popularity of your team and the number of fans you have, but I'm not sure that's exactly working correctly in the game right now. Okay, you got initial max level. I believe that is the performance maximum for the first season when you start a new save for tier 1. I believe the maximum level of any team, of any part on any team, is going to be 350, 250, and then 200. So that's the maximum they can start with. So essentially, you're going to get a random level of the parts, but the maximum they can be are these numbers. The history seed, I assume, I've not really looked into this. The same thing with all of these. I assume that it is simply making up every time you do a new start, a new career, that it gives you a history of champions and finishing positions and so on for the various drivers and teams. Okay, then we get into the color used by that particular tier. So you have the ability to change that. You get into descriptions, the weight of the car, top speed of the car. I think this is actually overridden, or this may just simply be a default top speed for the first season. I'm not sure, because we've seen in another file how we can determine the top speed of the car. So I'm not exactly sure how these relate to each other. Then you get into the cars. What is the overall quality of each team? And I'm not exactly sure how that's quantified, but you can see that obviously the tier 1 teams are a good bit better than the tier 3 teams. And then the quality of the car, I would again assume that this is somehow used in the initial starting parts that each team gets. They will get some percentage of that based off of what you see for the individual team. And what I mean by that is, if you come back in, again, this isn't going to be all that easy to see, but you can see toward the end, you see that we got a whole bunch of stuff over here, and there's a whole bunch of numbers in there. And some of these relate to their performance, as well as some other files that do so as well. So I assume all of that somehow it determines an initial value for the strength of the cars for the different teams. Okay, you got some financial information here, again, which I've not really spent a whole lot of time on. And then finally, a couple of what appear to be graphics file that will be displayed on screen. So overall, if we scroll back over to the beginning here, you can see there is a lot to change and be able to customize these individual championships the way you would like, from the name, the colors they use, the tracks that you visit, the layouts within the tracks that you visit, the various rules, the teams that are a part of that, the prize money that's handed out, and so on. So again, a lot to do, and we'll sort of the way we'll end things here is the way I've ended the previous videos, by taking a look at and answering the question of, once you've made these changes, so you've come into the modded files, you've made your changes in here. Okay, you've gone into the buildings, you've made changes, or the championship file, you've made changes to locations, rules, what have you, and now you're ready to get these into the game and you're ready to start a new career and get going with these changes. So what you're going to do, for me, the 64-bit folder under the asset bundle extractor that you've already downloaded and installed. So you're going to open up your asset bundle extractor, file open, and we're going to go to, for me, I've copied the resource asset file under the extractor folder itself. So we're going to open up that file. Okay, then we simply scroll down through. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Okay, so we got championship. Let's search, and it did not find it. I'm sure I did something wrong there. But what we're going to do, whoops, is I've gone right past it. All right, so we're going to find championship. And here you can see a whole bunch of files. Okay, there we go. So you find championships, you highlight that, you can see it's a text file. We're going to go to plugins. And then initially, if you're with me in previous videos, you know that the way you get this into a text file that we've been looking through in our folder is you export to text, okay, and then it will ask you where you want to put it. But for now, we're going to import from text. We're going to click OK. It asks us which file do we want to import. Well, of course, we want to choose the one with the same name as the file that we're editing, which is the championships. And then you'll click Open there. And then from there, you'll get an asterisk next to the file denoting that it has now been modified. Once you have all of the files in here modified that you want, then you simply go in, save the file. And then once the file has been saved, wherever you choose to save it, then you will simply copy it and paste the new resource.assets file into your, again, Steam Apps, Common, Motorsport Manager, and Data folder. You'll find it in there. So you'll want to overwrite that one. But of course, we always make backups of the original. I've got a backup there and also backups over here within this folder as well. So never overwrite your original without having backups. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned some things. If I've made any mistakes, be sure to let me know, because just like everyone else, I'm not claiming to be an expert in this. I'm simply going through these files and learning everything I can, the best I can. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned something, and stay tuned for more Motorsport Manager.